Aloha, this is Rosa McAllister, and welcome back to On Being a Service Warrior, interviews with the firewalkers among us. Those who have had their struggles and yet have chosen to come out the other side into lives of service for others. Click subscribe and tap the notification bell to keep up with future episodes of this ongoing series. If this is your first time joining us, don't forget to catch up with other episodes in this series, as well as other offerings in Network's YouTube channel. Mahalo, thank you, and always remember you are the light. Be the light. Aloha, friends, and welcome back to another episode of On Being a Service Warrior. Today's interview is with maybe one of the mightiest I have yet to meet in this lifetime, Reverend Gus Roman. I met Reverend Roman, I think it was about 14 years ago or so, and I have been both awed and a wee bit intimidated ever since. You see, this is a man who truly is larger than life for what he has done, what he continues to do, his stature, his voice, and his very presence. But he is also so humble, so genuinely soft and kind. And when I am with him, even virtually, I feel seen and heard like rarely before. Reverend Roman is dad to my colleague, my friend, my boss, Shauna Roman. And it was not too long after Shauna joined with us at Networks that she kind of sheepishly came to Mike and I and said her father wanted to meet us. I remember we wondered why, like, were we in trouble? Was he checking us out to make sure his little girl wasn't in business with some creeps? But she assured us no, that she had talked about us, about Networks and our somewhat different way of business, and he was curious. So we met for lunch with Shauna and her mother scurrying away, and Mike and I were immediately put at ease and became big fans of Reverend Roman. I remember us leaving and shaking hands with him and feeling so honored, having been in the presence of true greatness. And when Mike suddenly died years later, it was Reverend Roman who spoke so beautifully at Mike's celebration of life at his request. More recently, we turned to Reverend Roman to help us look more into our private selves at Networks as we try better to help others and face the many challenges of our world: divisiveness, racial inequities, cultural biases, ongoing issues of supremacies, and so much more. And once again, his powerful words, his silences, his emotions have guided us well. I have often said that Shauna has wowed me over the years in her quiet, strong, fair, and unflappable leadership of our somewhat unorthodox crew at Networks. And I have said that while I know she clearly is in her own personhood, she carries on her family's legacy and lineage incredibly well. And so with all this and more, I am very, very happy and honored to be talking with Reverend Gus Roman today. Reverend.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank you, Rosa, for the insight of developing this kind of conversation that has the potential of being quite helpful to a number of people. Always say you never know what an idea will accomplish. Just have enough courage and integrity to embrace it and to share it. And God will do the rest, or as philosophers say, the cosmic or the cosmos will do the rest. God bless you. Well, who are you? Who am I? I'm Gus Roman. I was born in St. Bernard Parish, just a few miles outside of New Orleans, Louisiana. My mother was Mary Ballard. My father was Gus Roman. They never married, but I always knew who my father was. And he would periodically take time to remind me that I was his son. But it was my mother who sacrificed and took care of me and my sister, my little sister Rose. So I am the son of Mary Ballard, St. Bernard Parish, a wonderful, wonderful lady. And to this day, I miss her and feel her warm presence every now and then. I'm also a student. I'm sure that teachers never considered me a good student, but every teacher I had, I regarded them as my special guru, and never knew what guru meant. But they were special to me because they took time out to share with me what they understood to be the truth, insights in life. And some of them were trained teachers and others were not. And I would never say that one was more effective than the other, because the bottom line is the people you learn from rather, may not have the credentials, but they have the heart and the desire. That's always been my point of view. So I've been a student in the classroom, outside the classroom. And I've always felt that there were entities, discarnate entities of the spirit that led me to where I could get good instruction around authentic people who noted a desire on my part to want to understand. So I'm a student. I embraced education to the best I could. I had problems. There were blockages growing up in poverty in St. Bernard Parish. One room elementary school, large room, got four or five classes. But we made it there. And there's a lot of love on the part of those teachers. I never know how they managed. Also, not only was I exposed to whatever education St. Bernard Parish provided, but also New Orleans. And I went to some of the finest schools, public schools, but again, with great teachers. Wonderful principal, I never will forget her name. A lady by the name of Fanny C. Williams, one of the jewels in education. It was a project for her. It was a calling for her, and she gave herself to all of the kids as the principal in that little school called Belina C. Jones School in the 7th Ward in New Orleans, Louisiana. So I went to several elementary schools because Mama moved about. Joseph S. Craig, I never will forget, a great teacher there. I was in 6th grade. lady by the name of Mrs. Bryant. Frightened child on the first day going to school. Meeting her was such a blessing. And I met her later on when I was 29, 28 years old in Richmond, Virginia. And I don't know if she remembered, but she acted like it. But it was a very pleasant experience to be with Mrs. Bryant. So education, I'm a student, and I'm an authentic student. I always want to learn. And at 15, I was in the Army, and I met a sergeant who was in charge of education in Frankfurt, Germany. And I took a liking to him. He took a liking to me, and he put me not only in the classroom, but made me one of his helpers. And I thought that was a great honor. And that was a part of this whole educational experience. So throughout, education was not just sitting in a classroom for me. It was a very important part of my life. And I met some of the finest people in the world. And I would not be where I am if there is any good about where I am in life. They had a whole lot to do with it. So I thank God for them so often in my prayers. I'm still their student. So I can go on and on. And that's the way I would describe myself, as a son of Mary Ballard, as the son of Gus Roman, who was not there with me to be a father, but I got pieces of him that made me proud of it. And that was a part of it. So a person who wanted to help people, as a youngster, I had this desire. It proved to be something that helped define my journey, these 88 years that I've lived. And I met people who nourished that part in my spirit. This was a good thing, and I can go on describing myself. My wife says, "Don't ever ask a preacher to do that. He'll go crazy."
How do you think your wife or your children or other people who know you well, how do you think they would describe you?
Oh, I think my family, there are moments in recollection, they would say that I was tough. But I never saw that myself. I insisted on certain things that they would do for their improvement and for the family, like cutting grass and doing that sort of thing. They would have moments like that. I would insist they do their homework and write a good paper for class. And I don't do a lot of smiling when I talk, so it's hard for people to see the pleasant part of me, and I suppose my children at times had difficulty finding that. But we did a whole lot of wonderful things as family, traveling and sharing my stories. They know a lot of my stories, some of my stories. I've been blessed with a good family, and God was, I think, at his best when he gave me the family that he gave me. Wonderful kids, great wife. Sometimes we all get angry at one another, whatever. But when you're thoughtful about what's happened really happened. It's been a blessing. And it's still a blessing to be with this family and to love them and to feel their love back. Yeah. So I think they would see me as a provider. I worked to take care of my family. My family was always first. Uh, we never, I never had a college education provided by my family. I worked to get through school, and I also helped my brother and sister. Later on, I had a little brother and sister, and I helped them to go to college. But I worked for education and helped people to be educated. So my family would think that of me. I'm a helper. I believe in education. I believe in taking care of your family. I'm not a great hugger. I, there's not a lot of smooching, anything. They used to ride on my back playing horsey and that sort of thing coming up. But I think they tend to forget that. But yeah, great family. I love them. They think a lot of me. I know they love me, and it's great. And they're all doing well. They've all finished college. The four. My oldest son died, and he had some problems. And I always say spiritually, he was very, very close to me. But the Lord took him about 2 years, 3 years ago. Uh, but my kids are great kids, and they would think highly of their daddy. They love their mama more, of course. Wouldn't have it any other way. Yes.
That's, and I would say I now understand why your daughter is not a hugger either. It's a big tease that I have with Shauna all the time. I always say, I'm going to give you a big hug and a kiss. And she's like, oh, no.
No. No. It has nothing to do with how we feel about people.
I know.
Yeah. But you're right. We need to practice that. My wife tells me it's a little late now, but go on and do your best.
Never too late. Never too late for a hug. So you've already shared a lot about your growing up, and thank you. And the second question that I always ask people, I always frame it this way, is I love to hear where people have come from, what their journey has been. And as I mentioned to you before, and I always say it in these interviews, we're not doing therapy here. So it's whichever, whatever you wish to share. But, so often I learned a long time ago, actually, from listening to people with really, really hard lives, people with disabilities who had been institutionalized. And I learned that, there's something about us human beings where we remember snapshots, we remember events of our lives, names of people like your teachers and things like that. But I learned well from my old friend Lester that if we look a little broader at our life, at maybe the chapters or the time periods of our life, we don't just remember an event or two, but we start seeing larger patterns and larger trends and larger things. And from Lester, I learned that even in the darkest of moments, there were incredible people there. And he seemed to gather them in, and it became a theme for his life that we saw. So rather than the various events of your life, if you were to say, what have your chapters been? Or what have the themes of your life been?
Well, the way I deal with my life, I'm 80 years old now, and it's just interesting that as I look at it, I see connections. I see a path I call the God path. And there were certain angels or persons or agents, folks who were there, experiences there events there that nudged me, made me pause to give some thought and get me on the path. So I've taken my life and these 88 years, and I've looked at it in terms of 7 years. And as I look at each 7 years of my life, I I look for, seek things that grab me that I can still relate to at a deep level. And the first 7 years of my life, 2 or 3, about 2 years, 2.5 years, I was in St. Bernard Parish with this young mother who was traveling to New Orleans here and there, trying to find a way to get to the city and to make a way for herself. And she had this boy, this big fat boy. She was wondering what she's going to do with him, but she knew she had to do something that was right by him, for him. So, so I remember vaguely as a youngster, as a babe, sitting on an old shack porch and my grandfather chewing tobacco and spitting tobacco, you know, and groaning every now and then and saying a word, whatever. And I found him full of mystery, but an old man who did not have a friend he could share with. And he would just sit on the porch on a rocking chair, chewing tobacco, had an old pipe he used every now and then. I'll keep it in his mouth for the most part, but never have any tobacco in it. And just think. And I would wonder as a child, what is this old man thinking about with his eyes half closed? And that's how I knew my grandfather on my mother's side, Harry Ballard. I could see him now in overalls and country overalls and those shoes that he wore up to his ankles and white socks and red handkerchief and rocking his chair, spitting out his tobacco and remembering his past. And I was wondering, what in the world is he thinking about? That's 2, 3 years old. That meant a lot to me. My mother took me to New Orleans, and we lived with my aunt, her oldest sister, and Daisy, Aunt Daisy, just a wonderful, wonderful lady. Oh my God. She was the provider in our family. She was the one who got a job, and her job was working for, a well-off white family. She had a house and gave Mama a room, and that's where we got started. Place on Parker Street, and there, St. Claude Avenue. Never will forget that. There was an elementary school that became quite popular around desegregation. There was a professor from Harvard who became quite popular because he embraced this child in integrating that particular school. Later on, I met this professor at Harvard when I was doing some work with a national organization. But that's 3 years. My first 7 years, when I was 6 years old, I went to Joseph Craig School. I went to several elementary schools, but the first school I went to was Craig School. That's where I met Mrs. Bryant. I'm 6 years old. At 7, I remember a great fire that took place. It was a great fire. The Gypsy Tea Room. That's where all of the jazz artists would hang out. It was in 1937, and I think the address we lived at in the 1300 block of Saint Anne Street in the Sixth Ward of New Orleans. That was quite a fire. Became quite known throughout New Orleans and the South. And there was several gypsy tea rooms in other cities. But the great jazz artists of New Orleans used to hang out at the Gypsy Tea Room. Never will forget it. And when it burned, it was like an event in my life. A lot of change took place, and I have to figure out what some of those changes meant. I think one of the things it meant is that it identified jazz for me in a tragic sense, uh, because jazz was not just music that made you dance and hop, but with the fire of the Gypsy Tea Room, uh, I saw sadness associated with the jazz. And the jazz artists, I was listening to Miles Davis not too long ago, and listening to him play his instrument, and I could feel the sadness there. Still jazz, and but the fire gave special meaning of the Gypsy Tea Room, special meaning as to what jazz really meant for black folks. It was a journey that sustained them, that helped them uh, express their pain and live with it and share it. Yeah. Uh, so that's my first 7 years. Uh, and I had, during that time, a cousin, a lovely man by the name of Abba. He was just a youngster, about 15, maybe 13 years old. But how he took care of me when I was 2 or 3 years old. And he and his girlfriend, and how they played in my hair and whatever. And they gave me a kind of warmth, a kind of love, a kind of meaning that I needed, because Mama couldn't give it to me. She's out trying to make ends meet. But Abba did. Abba. And in the Bible, Abba means father or daddy in the Bible. And he was a kind of daddy for me. And it meant a lot. It kept little me together. That's just 7 years. And my next 7 years, well, something else happened that was tragic in the first 7 years. I was, at the age of 6, I was struck by an automobile, and 2 legs broken, my face opened up, there's blood everywhere, and that sort of thing. And I didn't think I was going to make it. So they took me to Charity Hospital. That was the big hospital where poor folks went. And what happened there, I will never forget. There was a young intern, a doctor by the name of Khan, Dr. Khan. Dr. Khan was more than an intern rather. He was a very deeply concerned young physician. He stood by my bedside every opportunity he had. He'd bring his lunch there, to be there to make sure that I was getting the kind of attention I was supposed to have. I don't know why this youngster took to me, but it was one of the great things that happened in my life was to find this Caucasian, this young doctor who took a lot of time with me, and just sat by my side and told me stories and made me comfortable. And I was on the seventh ward, and I would look for him to come. I would not be what I am for sure. I don't think I would be without that kind of physician, that kind of youngster, that kind of love that I had from Dr. Khan. I always wanted to meet him after I got grown, but just couldn't make the contact. But there is a heaven I want to see him and just give him a good hug and thank him. He's a fine young man. Fine. And I know he became a great doctor. Great doctor. That's my first 7 years. The next 7 years, I was in elementary school, and I mentioned Evelina C. Jones as another school by the name of Craig. I mentioned Craig, but there's another one by the name of Evelina C. Covant School. And there I told you about this lady, Fantasy Williams. You might want to look her up. Google Fantasy Williams education in New Orleans. Boy, she held her own with everybody. But she was dedicated to our people and fought for us to get a quality education. Fantasy Williams. She became a principal, and she worked in the central office. Wonderful lady, bright lady. Wow. And then I had another person by the name of Mr. Craig, who was at Evelina C. Jones, not Evelina C. Jones, but Marie C. Couvent Elementary School. Get 88 years old, you get these things a little twisted. But again, I met this gentleman who taught math. I was, I suppose, about 12 years old, and just a great guy, and taught me mathematics and gave me the kind of encouragement I needed to help me along the way. So as I look back and look at people who influenced my life at a level of depth and got me, nudged me, pushed me on the God path, I call the God path. These were the kind of folks that did that. So that was my math teacher. And then later on, I transferred to Craig School again, where I graduated from elementary school. And that was a great experience. What I find that there were people, just individuals that showed up, emerged, and I was with them for a while, and then they faded away, or something else happened. I had to go some other place. But now I see how important those people were. They were God sent. They were angels. They were spiritual agents. And without them, I could not be. And every 7 years, and that's the way I look at my 7 years. So I graduated when I was 15 from elementary school. And at that time, I went to the Army. I went to the Army because the youngsters were going to the army. That was one way mamas could keep their kids out of trouble and get some discipline for them because they could not discipline them the way they wanted to. But my mama signed a paper saying that I was 17 and I was really 15. And I went to the army and stayed in the army for 2 years. So I was 15, 16, and almost 17 in the army. And there I met this sergeant I told you about, a remarkable man who just helped me with education. He made it live, and he had love with his way of teaching people whatever. And in the army, here is this 15, 16-year-old boy with these grown men, and, bad habits and all of that sort of thing. But the balancer was this sergeant in education who gave me the balance I needed so I would not go the negative way all the way. That was a great experience. I was a truck driver in the army, and there was a time when the Berlin Wall was going up. So the U.S. soldiers and families, they were surrounded and could not get out of Berlin. So we drove trucks to the airport with goods, and those goods were taken to the families and soldiers in Berlin who could not get out. That was quite an experience. Day and night we were driving those trucks. I was 16 years old doing that. It's amazing. 2.5 tons, and then one time later on in trailers, those long trailers. So I got out of service around at the age of 17 and went back to school. And that's the influence of that sergeant, that fellow. Yeah. And I took 2 years. I took, I was at 9th and 10th grade in 1 year, and studied hard, and people were nice to me, and got through school in 2 years. I did 4 years of work. But I met an interesting fellow by the name of Eldridge Rodney. Eldridge Rodney was a young, handsome boy. He was a Christian and very popular. And he took a liking to me and invited me to his church. And I went to his church. And after being with him a while and going to his church, I felt that I wanted to be a part of that kind of family. And that's what it became for me, a family. The pastor became a kind of spiritual father for me. And he's a great man. His name was H.A. Bebel. Never will forget that brother. And I met guys in that church that helped me a lot, because there was a tendency, if not careful, to go back to what we call the world, to, work with mingle with the boys up to no good. But that church, that new family, gave me strength and identity with people who had a sense of mission and who had love for young people. And that was a blessing. You see that at 88. always, and this is why I welcome an opportunity to share with you, Rosa, because I want people to understand that the interactions you make with people, these are not just perchance. These are
Absolutely.
spiritual realities
Hmm.
reaching out to you to make you better persons and to get you on a path. And if you can learn this when you're young, you're quite fortunate. Uh, but maybe the best we can do as old timers is to tell them that those entities are there and
Hmm.
you ought to look out for them and embrace them and meditate so you can be sensitized to their presence.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah, these people were extremely helpful to me because reefers in my neighborhood had become quite a thing. People were selling it and youngsters going crazy with it, pills and whatever. But it was that spiritual family and that pastor and Eldridge Rodney and another guy by the name of Dave Butler. Dave Butler, a little short Dave Butler. I don't know if Dave went to eighth grade, but boy, what he meant to my spirit and to my soul, how he gave me an anchor, how he encouraged me, how he kept the bright side before me, how he kept the reality of an ultimate being before me, God, Jesus Christ, and how he testified about that and how that was real to him and how contagious that was for me. We would talk hours and hours and hours. And I think that if it weren't for Dave, I might have been in somebody's prison.
Mm.
But the church was a family. And that's something that we have to try to find today, rediscover the family and how the church can play a role as a family and a spiritual community to keep those things alive, those angels around us and that sort of thing. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Keep us aware.
keep
Keep
us
us
aware.
aware that there
Yeah,
are those angels.
yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. So I can go on and on, but I'll give you an opportunity because I'm in my what is this? I'm 15 to what? I'm 15 to 21 now. I'm in that category now. In church with Dave Butler, Elders Rodney, my pastor A.J.B. Bell. I'm having a ball. I got another friend I didn't mention of. He was my angel. His name was Paul Hayward. Paul Hayward was a man who got a degree. He took a liking to me. And he said, Boy, I want you to be my little brother and I want you to go to college. And I don't know how we're going to work this thing out, but I want you to go to college. And with my spiritual family, an opportunity was given to enter a scholarship contest or a contest for a scholarship. And AJB Bell told me about it. And he said, I want you to write a paper on this subject, religion as an empirical science. Religion as an empirical science. Find out what it means, read a couple of books about it, write a paper on it. I won't put you in a contest. And if you win, you'll get a scholarship. You can go to college. I said, wow, wow. I'm finished high school now, and now about to finish high school rather, and now I have an opportunity to go to college. And my spiritual family is playing a role in this. My pastor is. I entered the contest and won and won and won
Wow. Of
and won.
course.
It was more than winning.
Mm,
It was more than winning. It was more than winning. It was achieving. It was affirming
mhm,
that these forces, that God, the Spirit, working in your life, and He has proven Himself that He's going to be with you.
mhm.
And
Yes.
got that scholarship, went to Dillard University, and that's where the college started. So now I'm 18, 19 years old, 2 years there, and I'm working in a hospital as an orderly, as a nurse's aide, and whatever, and in church, and with Dave Butler and A.J. Bebel and Eldridge Rodney and Paul Hayward and another fellow by the name of Walter Smith. He was a graduate of Dillard and also a member of the church I was a member of, St. John Divine Baptist Church, my spiritual family. And he was such a source of encouragement. And that's it. And I'm there for 2 years. And later on, I get to Richmond, Virginia. And that's another story.
Wow. You definitely these angels, these people that kept coming. I was thinking that from the beginning of your stories, and you acknowledge that definitely. And that awareness, that did you have that awareness at the time that these were angels that were coming to you and guides and guardians,
You
or has that
know,
come later?
I think now it came later. It
Mhm.
it's personified now. Personified maybe about 12 years ago, because the last 25 years I became attracted to what we call in our church pneumatology. Pneumatology is the teaching doctrine about the Holy Spirit, about the Holy Spirit. And in our churches, as we became educated and sophisticated and that sort of thing, we 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 got away from that kind of thinking about angels, about the Holy Spirit being real. Everything became doctrinal, philosophical, theological, and whatever. So about 25 years ago, the reality of the Holy Spirit, the great oversoul, the great Spirit of God, I became quite keenly aware of that. And it became a personal thing for me. And now, as I look back over my life, I, uh, I see it. I read it. I read the track. I could see it. You know.
Right. The
Yeah.
patterns become very clear, don't they? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. So I'm in. I go to Richmond, Virginia. I'm at Dillard for 2 years. I meet some wonderful professors there. Guy who taught biology by the name of Dr. Boggs, and another guy by the name of Blackwell, Lucian Blackwell, taught chemistry. Uh, just fine men, highly respected as educators, and I met them. A fellow by the name of Dr. Miller, a philosopher, met him, and these guys, I saw them in a personal way So when they said something to me, it was not simply a lesson from a book, but it was something that came from their heart that they wanted to share with me. Yeah. So I'm 2 years at Dillard, and my friend Paul Hayward moves to Richmond, Virginia. And I asked, "Where's my friend Paul?" And somebody says, "He's gone to Richmond." I said, "I'm leaving New Orleans. I'm going to find my friend because he was an angel I knew for sure that was helpful." And I went there, and it was miraculous how I found him. I didn't have an address. All I knew is that he was living with a lady that sold houses. She was in real estate, and that she was on 7th Street, which was one of the main streets in Richmond. And, and I didn't know her name, didn't have an address or anything, but I hopped on a bus with a few things I had, went to Richmond and found 7th Street and started asking people, "Do you know a lady, colored lady who sells real estate in real estate business?" And went right to the block where she was. And the fellow said, "Well, I don't know. There's a lady in that house right there, in that office there. She sells real estate." I said, "Yes, well, let me check her out." And I went in there and said, "Ma'am, my name is Gus Roman, and Paul Hayward was a friend of mine. He came here, and he had a relative that did the work you did. And I'm trying to find Paul. He's a good friend of mine." She said, "Boy, where you from?" I said, "From New Orleans. I'm looking for my friend." She said, "Paul Hayward lives with me." Wow. How can you explain?
There you go. Again. Yeah.
Again, again,
Again.
yeah, again. And now I need a school. And the school now is Virginia Union in Richmond, Virginia. And the people Paul stayed with got me a room and helped me get a job at a country club waiting on tables. So I got to school, Virginia Union, and quite an experience there. And had another pastor, A.W. Brown, 6 Mount Zion Baptist Church, another spiritual family, another mother. Bertha Jackson took me in her home, charged me $5 a week rent. No problem. I got more than that in tips. I worked. I waited on tables. I made good money, and I got to the church through her, and that was it. I graduated from Virginia Union. Wonderful experiences there. Wonderful experiences. Again, a lot of angels. A lot of angels. I suppose the angel I met that meant most in my life was Reverend Sullivan, Leon Sullivan. I met him around 66, 65, when I was pastoring a church in Baltimore, Maryland. And when I met him, it was, a kind of love at first sight. Things clicked. I was with a delegation to learn about the work that he was doing here in Philadelphia. And I saw his program. We visited with him. But at the end of the day, Dr. Sullivan said, "I would like to share more with you, but your bus is ready to leave. So you chaps go on, and we might can work out something in the future." I said, "Well, they'll go, but I'll stay." And I stayed, and we developed a relationship. And and he became like an older brother to me. And with him, we developed programs to help people in Philadelphia, around the country. We developed programs in Africa, and we developed programs. We had dealings with South Africa and the Sullivan Principles, and very dangerous work. And that's it. And it's a great life.
Mm.
Great life.
And it
Great
must have
life.
been so exhilarating, dangerous, definitely, from what I remember and what I understand.
Oh yeah, very dangerous.
Very dangerous, but very exhilarating, very brave, very, very wonderful work you did together.
Yeah. We, Sullivan was the first Black, as you know, on the board of General Motors, and I was the one who helped him to flesh that out. What does that mean for a man who loves poor people, who wants to help poor people, to sit on the board? How can you help them? And so we played with that and came up with some things. I set up an office called the Corporate Relations Support Office. That office was set up to deal with answers to that question. How do we make sense as people who love our people, and to be in the midst of all of these opportunities that exist to help people? How do we channel these things to help people? And people will not like it, and you have to stand alone. And he stood alone, and arguing for procurement opportunities for minority businesses, dealerships for minority businesses, contracts for minority businesses. Yes, we did that. It's an interesting thing. And South Africa, of course, right in the midst of apartheid, and it was my job to take the wishes of Dr. Sullivan to try to desegregate, get rid of apartheid by using General Motors as a leverage and other U.S. corporations to bring about change and to eventually destroy apartheid. That was the last great task that we had. Yeah.
I remember, I think I related to you previously. I did not meet Dr. Sullivan, but I certainly know of when I grew up outside of Philadelphia, a suburb outside of Philadelphia. And I remember, I'm not sure exactly when, I think it was in high school, learning about OIC, Opportunities Industrialization Centers, that he started. And I later worked at Temple University, Ritter Hall, right next to Progress Plaza, which he started. And I remember being so curious, and I would spend, while I was working at Temple, I would spend many lunch hours over at Progress Plaza talking with the various shop owners and learning more about him and his work and all that he and you and others did. I was aware, but being a Irish Catholic white girl from the suburbs, I didn't live it. And I remember learning so much more.
Well, I think the work in South Africa proved to be the most dangerous. There were moments when we took the OIC program to other parts of the country that things got pretty tough and rough there. I remember meeting Governor Forbes in Arkansas. And shortly after the skirmish there, and trying to set up a way to help our people in Arkansas, it got to be pretty tough. And in the city, I mean, he personally had a whole lot of problems. The mayor was Rizzo then for some of those years, and there were some unique problems that occurred from that leadership. Yeah. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. It's been quite a journey. But wherever we went, God always had angels in strange places. They come out of nowhere to help you. Plus the big fella himself, God himself, would show up every now and then when you really needed a real big punch. Yes.
Absolutely.
Well, that's where some of these experiences have taken me. I don't know if you have any questions about any of that. I'd be glad to try to answer.
I have so many questions. I'm just curious, how many churches have you pastored?
First, I was a chaplain. I got out to seminary in 1959. Out to seminary. And right after that, I went to the Army and served as a chaplain for 3 years. And for 3 years, most of my parishioners were Caucasians. The chapels I served as chaplain in had many more Caucasians than blacks, just a few blacks. So I was their pastor, at least I tried to be their pastor. And I went to Korea I was in Korea for a year. I was a year in Oklahoma, Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And after that, 3 years, I did community organization work in Washington, D.C. when I got out the Army. I did that for about a year. Howard University, the school I graduated from, had a relationship with the School of Social Work of Howard University. And they were experimenting or had a demonstration program utilizing some community organization techniques with churches in a poor district, the second police district in Washington, D.C. I took a job with them for a year to organize churches to do social service work, human service work with the poor in the neighborhood of the second police district. I did that for about a year. Then I was called to First Baptist Church in Baltimore, Maryland. I served there for 3 years. And it's the oldest Black church, Baptist church in the state of Maryland. Coming from this background of social service, human service, and organizing churches. That was one of the first things I did when I went to First Baptist Church in Baltimore. First Baptist Church was we call it a sophisticated church. It was more or less quiet. They had their services, a number of educated people, but nobody's rocking the boat at First Baptist Church. But the experience I had working with some of the ideas of Saul Alinsky in Washington, D.C., when I got out to service, I tried to install them, establish them in Baltimore at this First Baptist Church. I had it's another angel, a different kind of angel, a fellow by the name of Dr. Homer Faber. He was doing a study of Black neighborhoods in East Baltimore. And my church was a part of that study. At least we were located as a part of the target area. So I had conversations with him. So immediately I organized a social service entity with our church and a few other churches to deal with some of the common problems we had in the neighborhood. And those problems had to do with, we had a major university there that we needed to have conversation with every now and then, Johns Hopkins University. They were just moving all over the place. And then the mayor, we needed to have a conversation with him, so that little organization helped us to do that. And we had a business in the neighborhood. Somebody had raising chickens and smelling up the neighborhood, and we had to do something about that. So that work I did in Washington D.C. with Second Police Precinct, working with those churches, had something to do with what I was doing in this church. And I was able to put that together now, recently, but I didn't see any connection prior to that. But that was so important. So I'm at First Baptist Church, and the organization and Dr. Homer Faber, an economist at Morgan State College, was very helpful to me and about the economics in the poor neighborhoods and what churches might consider doing. I had an attachment with him, and he was the one who organized a delegation to go to Philadelphia and introduce me to Reverend Solomon. And I told you about that story. But when I was at First Baptist Church, some interesting things took place there. Of course, you had the traditional programs, but Head Start had just come out. And I wanted our church to benefit from Head Start. They were talking, it was so new, and churches were a little reluctant to do this, to get involved with government programs. So I took on the challenge and got the first program, Head Start program, in Baltimore, Maryland. And it was a kind of test case and a lot of headaches, whatever. But it proved to be very helpful to a lot of families. And I got another project started where we call it the grandparent the foster grandparent program, where older adults, because we noticed that grandparents were doing a lot of the work that mamas wanted to do and couldn't do because they had personal problems or they had to work and whatever. So grandparents had to do it. So we got a contract, got a program funded, so we could provide some learning experiences for grandparents to take care of children while their mothers were at work. That was a very good program. Um, that program got started the time I was about to leave First Baptist Church. And after 3 years at First Baptist, I went to this church, Canaan Baptist Church. That was a church I spent most of the time in the ministry. And I was there for 14 years. And then from there, I went to Berean Church in Brooklyn, New York. And that was quite a challenge there. We were able to develop some houses there, sponsor some houses. We had about 255 houses there we sponsored as a church. And I refused to take anything from it personally. And the mayor, we of course kept the fire under the mayor, and we got 255 houses, and 4 bedrooms went up for about $64,000. Back then, that's a good deal. New Horizon Project, the New Housing Project. That was a project that we sponsored as a church, the Berean Church. And we developed, while I was there, programs in the Martin Luther King Jr. March. I started that to have a program celebrating the accomplishments of Dr. King and to talk about how some of that can be used in Brooklyn. So each year we had a large celebration of Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and very large. And we had a Good Samaritan house that we provided for poor families. It was only one house, but it was to be a prototype. And we had families to move in there until they get on their feet. Then we'd have someone else to come in. We call that the Good Samaritan house. And we had food for the poor. So every day, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, we fed the poor in our church, hot meals. And that was quite a thing for the church to do. It was hard for them to accept a program like that, but they eventually did. And then we got a truck from the city, an old ambulance truck, and we took meals to certain parts of Brooklyn and fed people on the corners there. So it was quite an experience. Yeah.
And then you came back to Philadelphia, eh?
Yeah, back to Philadelphia thank you. Back to Philadelphia to Zion Baptist, where Reverend Sullivan pastored. And I stayed there for 7 years. And while there, for 7 years, we were trying to keep alive the Sullivan legacy, which was quite a challenge, but also to bring to Zion a spiritual dimension, what I call around pneumatology, and to look at spiritual lessons, Bible lessons, and that sort of thing. And to do discipleship kinds of things and mission work and that sort of thing. So I was trying to strengthen the church as best as I could. And I was there for 5 years at Zion, and then went back to Canaan. And there I was I went back to Canaan I came to Zion in 1988. In 1993, I went to Canaan. And in 2006, I retired from Canaan. And that's the church part of my life. After that, I tried to work with churches who did not have pastors and to help them to find pastors. And that was an interesting experience.
It's just so amazing. I'm jotting down little notes as you're talking. Every time we talk, I'm always just like, oh my gosh, oh my goodness. And there's another connection and all that. I think I might have mentioned to you, I was a student of Saul Alinsky myself, and followed his principles and worked with many, many different groups, worked in Head Start early on in some of the beginnings of that. And I didn't realize you had been at Zion Baptist Church. Actually, my friend Lester, who I mentioned in the beginning, who had lived in many institutions, or one very famous institution, that was his church. So I became pretty involved at Zion Baptist Church with Lester as well. And the amazing fellowship there. They welcomed us outsiders like nothing and taught us so much. It's just so amazing listening to you on and on. And I wonder, I mean, you've tapped into this, but if you were, what's your mantra or your strongest belief in living? I'm hearing this about these angels and these connections and the being open to that and the guidance that you've received. But there's also this other part of you, obviously working very hard and being aware and being open and gutsy, very gutsy.
Well, I'll tell you, most mornings I get up with a dozen ideas. And soon after that, I wonder, what in the world am I going to do with them? And I have a few people I call, and
I'm laughing because this feels very familiar. This sounds very familiar to me.
Yeah, so that doesn't work. It's not working too well. But I have a few things that I want to do. In Africa, there are some things. I would like to develop some farms. There's a school in Zimbabwe. It's a Bible school. They must have about 75 to 100 ministers in students, and they have some other church leaders, and they have some land. And I've talked with the pastor about looking at the curriculum and see if we could put some more courses, consider some more courses that would be germane to where people are in neighborhoods. So in the villages where nearby villages, if classes can be developed in the school, in the Bible school, for some of those people, and what courses would they be to help them deal with some of their real practical, gutsy problems that they have. Can they develop small farms? What would it take for them to? How much land can they get? Can we find ways to get land to them, or something that they can develop? And we buy supplies and seeds and that sort of thing, and help them develop small farms to take care of their families. So we've talked about that. We've talked about about developing little houses, something better than what these people have, and can prefab them. Can we find a way to prefab these houses and and have people on this side sponsor houses for $500 or $600? Can we put something up for a family and prefab it? And can we use mud packs or whatever that's out there that we can put together, cement, whatever we can? I'm concerned about that sort of thing. And in Zimbabwe, prefab is taking place. But Zimbabwe, like a number of African countries, their models are the large urban centers, and the people in the rural areas, their only hope is to go to the cities. Or some of them might have little farms, or there might be some larger farms that some of the blacks own or whites still have, and several whites still own farms in Zimbabwe, and they could work on and get some. But there might be a place that we could do some economic development for them to develop small houses, prefab houses for them. I've been thinking about public health. The president of the school, the Bible school, his wife is a graduate in nursing and healthcare, and I'm thinking about. I've talked with them about a public health educational program, show some good hygiene and whatever could be practiced, develop some manuals or secure manuals and make them available to people there. So it's just no end to it, the projects. And I want to have some interaction with some of the churches there. So a church in Zimbabwe, we would have their choir and our choir join together and learn hymns together and sing together and worship together, something like they do for the Globe the other night. One group is in DC or whatever, in New York, the others in Los Angeles. So maybe we could pull something like that together, whatever. Those are things that and several other things I'd like to get my hands in. I've talked to people about. So I got also senior citizens. Being a senior citizen, I'm just concerned about the ideas that they have that can be so helpful, and even the hands that they have that could be so helpful that will not be utilized because they're not on the agenda in any serious way. So I'm talking with some people in Brooklyn about doing something in that regard, senior citizen geriatrics and that sort of thing. And no, I don't have a staff or anything. I just give an idea and hope it'll fall on good ground and nourish it every now and then and push it and whatever. Give them $500.
Yeah, I always say the universe is always listening. And so especially when it's something not just for us, but it's for the good of others, the universe is listening and she wants to help. And it may not turn out exactly as we think, but it usually manifests. I'm a big believer in manifesting. I really am.
Yeah, I believe that. It might not be what you have in mind. It might not have your fingerprints on it. It doesn't matter, but the folks are being helped. That's the
Absolutely.
important. Yeah, and in your spirit, you can feel it. Yeah.
These are beautiful ideas. So I want to take us back to the first question.
Right.
So given all of this and everything else, so who are you? Who is Gus Roman?
Well, I'm trying to. The word is intelligence, it's purpose, it's a reason for being. Uh, I don't believe that God is finished with me. I believe there is still something else for me to do that will resonate with me and my spirit, like things in the past have, and I'm part of a purpose. The other morning, I said the Lord's Prayer about 50 times a day. Our Father which art in heaven. But every now and then, a verse just gets my attention. Your will be done. Your will be done as it is in heaven. Your will be done on earth. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Your will be done on earth as it. Your will be done on in me, through me, on me. I want to be a part of your will. I want to be a part of your will. And that becomes a part of it. And so I equate now the Spirit, the Holy Spirit now as a manifestation of the will of God, or the manifestation that will certainly get a grip on me to put me in the will. So it's around purpose right now. It's around I put my hands in all of these things and whatever, and folks don't understand, and it's all right, it's all right. But at least I keep the subject before them. They'll have to, when they talk with me, they know that they got to listen to me, at least for 5 minutes. After that, you do what you want to do. But I know that God has something else. He has something else, and I'm looking for that something else, and I'll know it when it comes. And I'll know it when it comes, and that'll be my farewell song. Yeah, yeah.
I can't wait to see and hear what that is, what next it is.
And God bless you. Yeah, yeah. I have a young
Thank you.
lady. I have a young lady who's working with me now, and what she's doing, she's taking these my methodology in terms of understanding my life, and to tie that into Sullivan.
Mm.
You know, tie it into Sullivan, not just my life, but to tie it into Sullivan. You know,
Mm.
let me walk with Sullivan until he died in April of 2001. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I was with him until the end. He kissed my hand. He kissed my hand. And he asked me, he said, you know what that means? I said, Doc, don't kiss my hand. I don't like this. So we were close, very, very close.
Mm-hmm.
And I am now in a little project talking about the legacy of Sullivan. I was on a radio program uh, talking about that, how the work of Dr. Sullivan did not come out of a classroom. This is not an economist you're listening to. This is a man who walked with God, who listened to the Spirit. And out of that walk and that consciousness, factories developed, all these programs developed. Yes, so much developed, so much developed. I mean, people don't have the slightest idea. You're talking about 25 different efforts, around Dr. Sullivan and whatever. So that's one of the things that I'll be getting into as a project. I have somebody working with me on it. Yes.
Wonderful, wonderful. And what a lucky person to work with you. Oh my gosh, and to learn more from you. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
ever
you.
so
You're
much for
welcome.
sharing. I think we could probably talk for hours more and learn so much more. And I thank you so much for your wisdom that you shared
Wow.
with us. And
It's a lot of
and
time.
everything.
What you come up with after editing everything, let me take a look at it, please.
Will do. Oh,
Yes.
without a doubt. Absolutely, we'll
Okay.
do that. Reverend,
God
thank you
bless
ever
you,
so
ma'am.
much. And
Thank
you
you.
as well. Thank
Okay.
you.
Bye-bye.
This series on being a service warrior is brought to you by Networks for Training and Development Incorporated via funding by the Philadelphia and Northumberland Counties Behavioral Health Intellectual Disability Services in Pennsylvania, and with the help of Joe Sterling of Joe Doggy Productions, Waikapu, Hawaii. Many thanks to all our guests and fellow firewalkers for sharing their wisdom, learnings, and joy with us.